We recommend this product be installed by a competent gunsmith.
Modification of your firearm may nullify the warranty of the firearm's manufacturer.
No liability is expressed or implied for damage or injury which may occur from improper use or installation of this product.
You are responsible for the safe handling, legalities, and use of your firearm.
Warning: always wear safety glasses when working on firearms. Hi guys, coming back at you with another install video from Apex Tactical. Today we're installing our trigger kit into the Springfield XDs Mod.2 9mm pistol. Tools required for this installation are a hammer, a pair of 3/32 inch pin punches, one a straight flat pin punch and one that's got a coil roll pin punch type where it's got a little tip on the end, and a 16th inch pin punch, as well as a roll of tape is very helpful. For today's installation, we're going to be installing a grip safety spring and a trigger body. This one is one of the flat dark earth battle worn triggers that we're installing into a friend's gun. Wait. Before you get started, just wanted to remind you, if you have any problems, questions, or concerns during the install, contact customer service. You can email us, you can call us anytime. We're here to help. All right, back to the install. On frame disassembly, the first thing we're going to do is remove the rear Sear housing pin at the rear. It's this little guy right here. I'm going to use a coil roll pin punch. This has a little tiny tip on it that locks into the tip of that pin, so when I tap it out, it stays centered. I'll push that guy out, and then the other two I'll push out with my 3/32 pin punch that's got a flat end on it. Once those are out, I can remove the frame components from the frame. With my frame pins removed, I'm going to go ahead and pull the locking block up and remove it from the frame. I can also take out my slide lock lever. And now I can take my Sear housing, pull it up, and the trigger bar and everything else comes out with it. And now, just for safety, and just to make sure I don't lose it, I'm going to go ahead and pull my magazine safety out as well. And now my frame is fully stripped. Next, I'm going to need to remove my trigger bar from the Sear housing. I have to pull forward and move up just so slightly, and then pop the trigger bar up and out of the Sear housing like you saw there. From here, I can set that aside, and now I can disassemble my Sear housing. Before we disassemble the Sear housing, I want to show you what you're working with here. This is the thumb safety spring here. This sits against the Sear itself, comes back here and presses on the thumb safety, or the grip safety, and pushes it outward. So I want you to pay attention also, there's a little arm right inside of here, this guy right here. This has to be between your Sear and the pin down here. You can't have it down below where it wants to tend to fall or sticking way up. So it's got to be roughly in that position. So when we go to reassemble, we're going to put it back together like this. I also want to show you that at the back, you've got the little tab from the grip safety spring hanging out here. That's going to hit right in the middle of your grip safety to give it tension. So we'll go ahead and take this guy apart now and show you how the rest works. To get started with the disassembly of the Sear housing, we only need to swap out the grip safety spring. So here's a real simple way to do it. I orient the spring the same as it's going to go into the frame. I'm going to go ahead and push out that pin that holds the grip safety in, pull this one out, and I'll set mine in its place. I'll use my pin punch as a slave pin just to hold it, just to get it started. Then I'll take the factory pin, put it back across to capture that spring, and now all I have to do is reorient everything and put it back together. From here, I can put my trigger bar back in, and we can reinstall it in the frame. To remove the trigger bar from the trigger body, I'm going to take my 16th inch pin punch, I'm going to put it on top of the pin that holds the trigger bar, and tap it through. Doesn't have to go all the way out, just far enough to release the trigger bar. Now I can wipe that down, get all the grime off of it, and put it on my trigger. Though they're fairly obvious, I want to point out the differences between factory components and Apex's. You have the factory trigger here, and the grip safety spring here. Apex trigger and Apex grip safety spring here. Ours is shorter, has a shorter arm on it for a different installation method. To install the trigger bar on the trigger body, I need to align the trigger bar into the hole on the body. You can see I can basically get it to align there, but it's pretty loose and moves around. I also need to take up the space when I go to push it together. So I cut a piece of a business card that comes with the product off, and I'm going to basically place it right here when I place it into the trigger body. So I'll try to do that now where you can see it on camera. It's a little hard to do with how small this is, but we'll slide this guy in here, and we'll use that card to take up the space, and it prevents crushing of the trigger bar, or the trigger body, excuse me, and it gives us a nice steady alignment. Now that I have that in there, you can see that it's pretty much perfectly aligned. From here, I'm going to take it and put it in my vise and push it together. Now that I have the trigger bar and trigger body aligned together with my shim in there, we're going to use the vise installation method, and this is the way I recommend to do these. I use a vise jaw that has smooth jaws, where I've basically took them to a machine and just milled them flat. You can use a file if you need to, but get them smooth. If you want to use a block of aluminum in there instead of the serrated steel jaws, you can. Just smooth jaws. We're going to put the trigger in here, and we're going to use the vise to squeeze the pin down. And all I'm going to do is wiggle the trigger bar around to make sure it's capturing as I squeeze it down. As you can see, I can get down where it'll just touch. Then I can back it off, and my pin is almost perfectly flush. I'll take this, and I'll set it on the vise anvil, and I'll tap it in just to make sure it's flat if I need to. Check the other side too, and this is just perfectly flush. So I can even it out, but it doesn't have to be perfectly even. It'll be a little high on both sides. This is perfectly flush on one side, sticking out a little on the other. It'll work great as it is, so there's no need to move it around. Now I have the pin pressed into the trigger and bar. I'm gonna go ahead and remove my shim. At this point, my trigger bar should just fall like it does. I'm gonna hold the body and I'm gonna articulate the bar. The bar should float freely via gravity like it does. I'm also gonna hang on to the trigger body itself, and I'm gonna pop the safety and make sure it articulates and pops itself in and out. If the safety doesn't articulate smoothly, or it doesn't pop out like it should, or it sticks back, or the trigger bar sticks, that likely means you crushed the trigger body. Call customer service, will help you out. I recommend using the vise assembly method because it's the less likely way to crush the trigger body. Most of the time when we see crushed ones, it's because someone used a hammer to punch the pin in. So be cautious, be aware, do this check before you put it back in the gun. If you have a problem, call us. Before I reinstall my trigger bar into my Sear housing, I need to reconfirm that I have the spring and everything on the grip safety in proper orientation. I'm gonna hold my finger here so I don't push it too far out. I'm just gonna press on the spring and make sure it articulates the safety. That's where I wanna be. I'm also gonna roll it down and I'm gonna look in from the front. And I'm gonna make sure that this little safety arm here, this little tab, vertical tab here, is above this pin. And it's not sticking way up here. Right where it's at is right where I want it. So from this orientation, I'm gonna lay it sideways. And I'm gonna come in here, oh, that pin started to pop out. So I need to hold that pin from the back side. Take my trigger bar, I'm gonna capture that slot in the Sear. I'm gonna pull it, and I'm gonna try to rotate and catch into it and position my trigger bar. The final position of the trigger bar should be where the trigger bar is down against the side of the Sear housing right there. And from the top, it should look like this, where the Sear is in its usable position, and all we have to do now is install it in the frame. Now that I have the trigger bar reattached to the Sear, I realized when I let go of the grip safety, it popped right back out. So let's go over how to reassemble that with the trigger bar in place. I'm gonna hang on to the pin, roll this guy back over again like I did before. And again, I'm gonna push the spring all the way to the left side of the Sear housing, so the way this little tab goes. I'm gonna carry up the grip safety arm just above the Sear, bring the grip safety in. And then when I push this guy in, I hold it, if I press that spring down, it'll come out under spring tension. That's what I want. So from here, I'm gonna hang onto that pin, roll the whole thing over, and keep the grip safety pressed forward so I don't let it go again. Now I'll take it in my frame and reinstall it. We'll go over that next. With my grip safety confirmed and the spring confirmed to be in the right position where it's sticking out of the front of the Sear housing like you can see there, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the front of my trigger into the frame mortise. Come on now, drop that guy in. And then I'm gonna slide my Sear housing into the frame. Now, I wanna show you on the front here on the inside, as I slide this down, that spring sticking out is going to tension against the frame. And as I push it down, it's gonna push the grip safety out. Now, with it held in place with my thumb, just to keep it there, I'm gonna press on this. Grip safety is functional as it needs to be. We'll recheck that in just a minute once we get the frame pins back in place. But this is the proper function and orientation. Now that I have the Sear housing in place and confirm the grip safety is proper, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my coil roll pin that comes out of the Sear housing. I'm gonna start that guy in. I'm gonna use my hammer to tap that guy down to capture the Sear housing so it doesn't go anywhere and I don't have to realign that guy again. Now I can work on the front of the frame. Now that I've started my Sear housing pin, I'm gonna go ahead and take my coil roll pin punch. I'm gonna tap that guy down. Just make sure it gets just below flush because you're gonna grip right over that area. So don't leave it sticking high. There we go. Check the other side. Okay, we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and work on the front now. Now I'm gonna install my magazine safety plate. That guy's gonna go in underneath the trigger bar on the right side of the frame. So when that goes in fully, you basically can see it sitting just right there in the frame. The trigger bar, the trigger pin is gonna go all the way through that guy and capture it. So next we're gonna put the locking block back in position. In case you took apart the locking block assembly, I wanna show how that goes back together. I'll take my takedown lever, put it back in, and I wanna keep the tab in the up position. Now, if you go all the way through, all the way down, you're not gonna get the spring back in. You have to pull it back up till the little notch on the side aligns with the little notch down there in the Sear housing, or the locking block, excuse me. I'll take the spring, I'll set it into that pin, into that little notch, and I'll put it in the hole. This is proper assembly. Now we can hold this guy and drop it into the frame. The next component to install is the slide lock lever. I'm gonna take it, put the hole forward, set that down on the side of the frame. That's gonna sit right next to the trigger body itself. And the trigger body has some movement there in it still. So this is the proper orientation to put it in. You want this against the trigger body. You're gonna have a space between the frame and the slide lock lever, and you'll have a space between the magazine safety and the trigger body to then put the locking block in. So from here, I'll take my locking block. I'll hold the spring on the side. I'm going to slide that guy down. There's 2 notches on the top right here in the frame that it locks into forward and back. I'll lock into those notches and I'll bring it down. As I get into position, sometimes my takedown lever will move. So I just need to reposition that guy. And I want to orient it up and it'll kind of lock in place. And I'm going to press straight down and try to get it to lock in. If it doesn't go, I may have to move my spring here just to get it to lock into its little hole. If it doesn't work, I'll pull it back out, realign, and try again. As you go to install your locking block and all the components with it, if you find that you can't push it down anymore, it's probably because your takedown lever is too far in. If you look at it from the top, you can see it's way too far in. But on the back side is where you see what's really going on. You can see this little nub sticking way up on the frame. So I'm going to hold my finger on the back side. I'm going to press with my pin punch, I'm going to press that guy out where it's just flush. Once it's there, I'm going to kind of hang my finger there and I'll push this guy down into the frame. Now, once I'm here, I'm going to grab onto the frame with my thumb and I'm going to hold it down. What I want to do is show you the slide lock lever itself is under spring tension. The slide lock lever spring, this little guy here, needs to be on top where you can see it right here to hold tension on the slide lock so your gun doesn't lock open accidentally. This is proper assembly. Now all we have to do is put the pins back in. The first pin I'm going to reinstall is the trigger bar pivot pin. It's the larger of the 2. I like to go in from the right side of the frame first. I can go into the frame. This is going to capture my little safety lever. And then I can roll it over and look through the hole and try to align the trigger body itself to that pin. I can wiggle and jiggle around until it goes through. Now, if you look through the hole, you'll see that the slide lock lever is in the way. If I move this guy around, you can kind of see in the hole it's moving around there. I'm going to press down on the table while I move that lever around, and that's going to allow that lever, that pin, to push through while I align it. Once it aligns, it'll drop in just like you see here. Now, all I have to do, flip it back over, take my pin punch and press it down. There you go, until it clicks into its spring detent. That's fully installed. To check that real quick, all we'll do is grab the trigger body and articulate it. The safety will pop out and stay. That's perfectly fine for now. We'll get back to that in a minute. Next, we're going to install the locking block pin. That one can be installed from the left or the right, doesn't matter, and the pin's unidirectional. I'll put it in, give it a tap with the hammer, make sure it's down, and normally you'll hear a little click. Aha, there we go, when it locks into position. That's perfect. Now, all we can have to do, we'll hold the trigger body forward, touch the trigger safety. I got to grip the grip safety back here too, and I can articulate the trigger. Now we can do a function test. Now that we're reassembled, we're going to do a function test. First, I want to make sure that the Sear looks like it's in the proper orientation and that everything is functioning. So I'm going to grab the trigger body, pull it forward. You should see the Sear pop up into the capture position. From here, I have to press the grip safety down to be able to make it function. So if I pull the trigger safety in manually and pull it back, the Sear is not coming down like it should, which is because I haven't gripped the grip safety. I'm going to pull the trigger back forward. I'm going to hold this trigger safety down, kind of complicated to do, and I'm going to hold the grip safety. Now I'm going to pull the trigger, and I'm going to watch the Sear drop down into the fire position. This is proper function. We'll test this with the slide on to make sure it all works properly, but I want to show you how those safety systems work. The trigger blocks the safety, trigger safety blocks the trigger from being dropped, and the grip safety prevents the Sear from being tripped without being gripped. We're ready for function test. So I have the gun unloaded, no magazine, nothing present to worry about there. I'm going to go ahead and put the slide forward. With the grip safety pressed, I'm going to press the trigger body only, and it does not fire. If I hold the grip safety still and I press the trigger safety, dry fire, it fires. Holding the grip safety still, I'm going to cycle the slide, re-articulate, and make sure that works. I'm also going to hold the trigger down, cycle the slide, release, make sure the safety goes all the way out and blocks, and then I'm going to fire it again. I'm also going to test the grip safety, so I'm going to release the grip safety. Oops. Cycle the slide. I'm going to press the trigger safety in, press the trigger, no fire. That's intentional. The grip safety has to be depressed before the gun will fire. This is proper function. Now you're ready to go to the range and test.